Now, there was a point in time in this year's NBA season where this current Utah Jazz team that we're seeing playing amazing basketball right now, there was a point this season where this team had a record of 7-16, and it looked like they might be on their way to the NBA's draft lottery. But as of late, the Utah Jazz have completely turned everything around. Right now, they've turned that 7-16 record, and they've been playing so well. Now they have a record of 22-20. A record above 500, and also their ninth place in the Western Conference, so they now have a spot in the play-in tournament. And we look at the Utah Jazz, they haven't made any trades. These are still the same players on this roster, and don't get me wrong, I know Lauri Markkanen and Jordan Clarkson, they've dealt with some injuries so far this season, but with the same exact roster, the Utah Jazz have been able to find so many different things to make them play like one of the best teams in all of the NBA. And I think the biggest thing that we've seen so far to help turn things around for the Utah Jazz was Jordan Clarkson moving to the second unit. Over the years, we have seen Jordan Clarkson accomplish some very respectable things in his NBA career. We've seen him win the Sixth Man of the Year award. We've also watched him play some pretty pivotal roles on some pretty good playoff teams. And also, Jordan Clarkson is a player in the NBA that is volatile enough. He can go out and get you 30, 35, and if he's really getting hot, he can go get you 40, 45, or maybe even 50 points. He is a very explosive basketball player and a very explosive scorer. And this year, we saw the Utah Jazz try to integrate him into that starting role, and it just didn't work out too well for Jordan Clarkson as a starter this year for the Utah Jazz. Had one of the worst shooting stretches in his entire NBA career. I believe as a starter this season, he's shooting under 40% from the field and under 30% from the three-point line. And sometimes things like that happen. We've seen guys play really well with the second unit, but when they're asked to become a starter, and give that same type of production or try to give even more production from the six-man role, sometimes that doesn't work out for that guy that is the sixth man, because now you're playing against you're playing against stiffer competition, and we all know there's a big difference between the starting five and then the guys coming off the bench. I think the talent level, a lot of the times, I think it's a big gap between those two, because now we look at Jordan Clarkson. Now he's going to have majority of his minutes or majority of his night going up against a guy like Marcus Smart, who's a really good defender, versus as when you coming in with the sixth man, you're playing a lot more. You're playing a lot of your minutes when Marcus Smart is not on the court. So things like that could be very different for Jordan Clarkson. And the Utah Jazz made a very simple fix. This was very simple, but it's been really beneficial for the Utah Jazz, and that was bringing Jordan Clarkson back into that six-man role. And that doesn't mean that Jordan Clarkson sucks or anything like that. I think he's a very solid basketball player. He's athletic. He has a really quick first step. He can get hot from the three-point line. He can get downhill and finish around the rim. And since getting back into that six-man role, he has rose his field goal percentage. Now his field goal percentage is over 40%, and his three-point percentage is over 30% now. And also in the month of January so far, he's 47% from the field and 36% from the three-point line. Jordan Clarkson has made a career of being in that six-man role and dominating those matchups against the second unit, and that's where the Utah Jazz has found him to be the most impactful. And with this move right here, it has also led to another positive thing for the Utah Jazz. When Jordan Clarkson went back to the second unit, an opportunity opened up for Collin Sexton in that starting position, getting more responsibility. And in my opinion, I think Collin Sexton has become the second best player on this Utah Jazz roster. And when it comes to Collin Sexton, the one thing that I think's been big time for him this season is that he's been healthy, because I was just reading about him before this video, and I didn't know that this was Collin Sexton's 6th year in the NBA. It feels like this is just his 2nd or 3rd year, and that's just because we don't see him that often due to his injuries. And now that this year that he's been healthy and he's been given this opportunity with the Utah Jazz, he's been able to showcase how good of a basketball player that he is. Now, he's been a starter for the Utah Jazz 19 games this season, and this is what his stat stat line is in those 19 games. He's averaging around 22 points per game to go along with 5 assists and 4 rebounds. And the Utah Jazz have a record of 15-4 with Collin Sexton as a starter. Now that is very crazy, and there's so many things that you gotta love about Collin Sexton. And I know the one thing that everybody probably loves the most about him is his infectious energy. His energy is very pure, and it's also very intense, and it's also very tenacious to his opponents. You get a lot of great energy as a competitor for Collin Sexton. I feel like he's great for the fans, for the Utah Jazz. He's great for the teammates, and it's also great for his competition, that the attitude that he takes against opposing teams. So I love Collin Sexton in that manner, and he actually has a really good skill set. He plays the point guard position, so we know he can handle the ball pretty well. He has one of the best quick first steps in all of the NBA. He does a great job of putting relentless pressure on the defense with this ability to drive the basketball and finish around the rim. And what makes him even more dangerous is that he can get in that mid-range area and he can knock down that mid-range shot. And when you have a guy that can get downhill and he can stop and pop for that midi, you never know what to expect. So I love him as a scorer, and I also love him as a defender and as a rebounder. And Collin Sexton has just been amazing for the Utah Jazz this season. So I think Jordan Clarkson going back into that 6-man role has led to Collin Sexton being the second best player essentially for the Utah Jazz this season, and actually having a huge impact on these guys winning games. And another player that I think is a little bit undercredited on the Utah Jazz is John Collins. Now, there was a point in this season that even though John Collins just came to the Utah Jazz this season, that they may be moving him because his production to begin this year has been his production was a little lethargic, and then he went down with an injury, and he returned, and since mid January he's been playing some pretty decent basketball. He's averaging 13.5 points per game to go along with 7 rebounds, and he's doing it pretty efficiently. 52% from the field, 38% from the 3-point line, and he's an 86% free throw line shooter since returning from the injury in December. And aside from the numbers, I like the overall impact that John Collins gives the Utah Jazz on the offensive side of the ball. He's very athletic. They have him playing the 5 spot, so he's great in the 2-man game when it comes to rolling to the rim as a lob threat and just finishing catches around the rim. And then what makes it really cool when you have that center that can step outside and knock down a 3-point shot, because when you have that, now you have another interior defender who 90% of the time that he's playing in the NBA, he's guarding a guy that's around the rim. So when you have a guy hovering on that 3-point line, it really changes the way that teams have to play defense. So I think John Collins, he gives a lot of defensive versatility. A lot of offensive versatility to this team, and a security blanket going downhill around the rim. So I think these two guys have been big time for the Utah Jazz this season. And those were my biggest takeaways from the Utah Jazz as of right now. I think Jordan Clarkson moving back to that 6-man role has been very impactful. Collin Sexton is showing us how good he is this season. And then John Collins has been so impactful and so versatile for this basketball team. And other than that, I love the coaching job that Will Hardy is doing right now with this team. This is a well-coached team. He has everyone being productive with their roles and also happy with their roles. And I love the way that the Utah Jazz, I love the brotherhood and the camaraderie that they have right now. You listen to the coach, you listen to the teammates, and when you listen to them in the press conference, questions, they're always talking about how great of a job the next guy is doing. They're constantly uplifting each other, and they're playing team basketball. We're not watching one guy dominate the ball. Everybody is touching it. I love Kelly Olynyk. I loved him on the Pistons. He is just a guy that knows how to play the game of basketball. He's not the quickest, he's not the fastest, he's not the strongest, but he knows how to score the basketball. He's just one of those guys that's in the right place at the right time. And the Utah Jazz just have a bunch of those guys on this team. Chris Dunn has found a role on this team, has been that point of attack defender causing trouble on the defensive side of the ball, annoying the opposing team's best playmaker. He has done a great job with that. So the Utah Jazz have a really good team. They have Lauri Markkanen, who I think his skill set is very underrated. Also on the defensive side of the ball, he's a very underrated player. So the Utah Jazz has some pretty good pieces. They're playing at an extremely high level right now, like at a level at like one of the best teams in the NBA type of level. When we look at them over the street, they're not beating bad teams. Like if you look at the stretch of games that they had, this is a really hard stretch of games. Just off the top of my head of what I can remember, beating the Indiana Pacers, beating the Philadelphia 76ers, they've beaten the Milwaukee Bucks, and I know I'm forgetting some because there's some other really good teams they have beat recently as well. But that's gonna be it for this video. If you guys enjoyed, please leave a like, comment down below if you agree or disagree, and then subscribe for more weekly content. We do this all the time, man, and that's curtains.